about this exciting radio broadcasting opportunity by calling WNZK Radio at 248-557-3500. This is WNZK, Dearborn Heights, Detroit, your ethnic superstation at 690 days, 680 nights.
Stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
And good morning, everybody. It's Friday, March 14, 2025, and I'm Ray Hanania. This is Radio Baladi on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK, AM 690 radio, broadcasting live in Michigan this morning. Our call-in number is 248-557-3300. I got a great guest this morning that's right on top of the big news that really impacts our community. My guest this morning is civil rights attorney David Chami. He's going to be talking about the assault on Arab Americans and Muslims and the push to expel Columbia College graduate Mahmoud Khalil. Chami, who is with the Consumer Justice Law Firm, represented 22 of 27 students who were suspended from Arizona State University after being accused of trespassing and damage to property, and I'm sure a variety of other things last April. So this whole targeting of Mahmoud Khalil really kind of began after the violence started between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, continued on college campuses last year, and has now aggravated, I guess might be the word, and it's gotten worse because not only are they trying to suspend students, they want to actually kick students out of the country. We're going to take a quick break in a minute, but I want to make sure you check out our website at hanania.com. If you go there in the notes section right at the top, you'll see a story, an interview that I did with our guest David Chami in Arab News. You can get the link there and you can read it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with David Chami on the assault on American and Muslims in the U.S. and the growing campaign to expel anyone who criticizes the government of Israel at a student campus. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them one or two benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Jumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
Last Ramadan, you made it possible. 9,599 food baskets, 2.9 million meals, clean water for 56,600 people, hope for over 13,000 orphans. This is the difference your giving creates. Lives changed, dignity restored, hope renewed. As Ramadan approaches, the need is urgent. Families are waiting. Orphans are depending on us. Clean water is still out of reach for many. Every dollar, every basket, every well makes an impact. Be the difference they're praying for. Don't wait for Ramadan to start. Make your impact now.
And welcome back to
at lifeusa.org.
Oops. We love lifeusa.org and Jumana Kiruz. She is a phenomenal attorney. If you're in Detroit in the Michigan area, she does a tremendous job. I'm so happy to hear her ads. She's just a force when it comes to law there. But I'm talking to another force when it comes to civil rights law and representing the rights of people across the country, David Chami. David, listen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Ray, for having me.
So we were talking about. I did that story with you. I talked to you about Mahmoud Khalil, who's been arrested, and they want to kick him out of the country because of his role in participating at Columbia University. Protests against the government of Israel. Now, when I went to college, of course, it was in the 70s during the Vietnam War. And by the way, for all those people out there, I served during the Vietnam War, served in the U.S. Air Force, like my brother and my father and uncle who served during World War II. During the Vietnam War, when I was at college at Northern, we were able to protest. We were able to gather. We were able to criticize foreign policy. We were able to do a lot of stuff. What the heck has happened, and what is going on? And it seems like it's only a certain group of people who can't protest. What's happening?
Ray, I would say that, I think we have short-term memory loss. We tend to forget that the government tends to always try to some degree to suppress protest, to suppress dissent. We can't forget the Kent State shootings, during the Vietnam War. So
Right.
it's not that the government hasn't always tried to suppress, dissent. What's I think unique about the dissent they're suppressing today is they're not suppressing dissent to U.S. foreign policy. They're suppressing dissent to the policies of a foreign government. They're suppressing opposition to the Israeli government's what I can only characterize as an ongoing genocide. And I think, the International Criminal Court at this point has basically validated that position. I think you'd have to be blind. In fact, I would argue that United States politicians at this point on both sides of the aisle are willfully blind to the ongoing genocide. And so, I think there's evidence that the Israeli government has been plotting and planning to influence politicians and by politicians to do this very thing. We've passed dozens of laws in different states which literally make it unlawful to criticize Israel. We are seeing the state legislatures in many states and even the recognition in the United States Congress of the use of the definition of anti-Semitism that includes criticism of Israel, which the attempt to conflate those two things to me is terrifying, because what you're saying is the criticism of a country's policies is racist, and that simply those definitions don't align.
And that's a phenomenal point you make. I never thought of it in that perspective. When we were protesting against the Vietnam War, we were protesting against U.S. government policy as Americans. Now, these students are protesting against the policies of a foreign government, not a country, not a Jewish people, but a foreign government that happens to be aligned with the administration, and they're being targeted. This has been elevated, and the argument that you make, I mean, whether you're critical of Israel or whether you're supportive of Israel, what's happening is even rises above that when they target a guy on either side of that debate, when they target a student and say, hey, your speech is hate speech because you're criticizing a foreign government and we're going to kick you out of the country. You have a green card and we have the right to throw you out. And I think that raises some issues, doesn't it? I mean, let's say I have a green card. I don't think they can just throw me out for expressing views critical of a foreign country. Can they?
Man, there's so many different ways I can answer this question.
It's amazing. It's just unfathomable that we've, deteriorated into this like 1984 atmosphere of Big Brother and oppression, censorship. Talk about the green card issue for a minute, because that's what everybody's saying. He's a green card holder. He has no right to criticize the whatever. And as a consequence, the government has a right to throw him out of the country. They've arrested him. They're holding him in detention. Have they charged him? They've never convicted him. Tell us about the dynamics of the legal aspects of him being a green card holder, what they can and can't do to him.
So, so, so Ray, I would tell you that it is 100% without any doubt unconstitutional to attempt to extrajudicially deport a green card holder based on their speech. Title 8, so I would encourage your listeners, you can Google it, Title 8, Chapter 12 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Section 1101C lists the 6 things that can result in the deportability or the removal of a lawful green card holder. If you abandon your status, right? If you relinquish your status, then you can lose your green card. If you leave the country and you remain outside the country consecutively for more than 180 days, you will have been potentially determined to have abandoned your status. If you're a resident here, you need to be here at least 6 months out of the year. If you've engaged in illegal, which is unlawful activity, which speech can never be, and almost never be, and definitely was not in this case, and that is engaging in illegal activity after having departed the United States. So it would be illegal activity in another country, or if they've departed from the United States while they are under legal process seeking removal, right? So if the government was seeking removal and then you leave the country, you can lose your green card. Finally, and well, there's 2 more, but the one that I think is the most important one and the one most people are removed under, and that is committing very specific enumerated types of criminal acts. And they're identified in the laws, and they're crimes of moral turpitude, so fraud, perjury, drug offenses, murder. These are very major and specific types of offenses. And then, the last one, which doesn't apply here, it's trying to enter at a time or place other than the designated, immigration officers where you'd expect to find them. So if you're trying to illegally cross back into the United States after having left. So these are they're enumerated in the statute, and the fact that the United States is attempting to claim that the government, the Trump administration is attempting to claim, well, we can take away his green card. He doesn't have permanent status. No, the laws are written in a way that makes it very clear. So they're not trying to remove him, or maybe they were trying to remove him because they thought he was a student visa holder. And so they were trying to remove him because they thought, well, you don't have residency here. We can remove you for any reason. And when they realized that he was now a green card holder, married to an American citizen, by the way, who was 8 months pregnant with a soon-to-be American citizen child, they've shifted their position. And for anyone who's saying there must be something he did during those Columbia protests to justify it, if they had that evidence, you would have already heard it.
Yes, and there's another very important point that when I interviewed you, you made that I think is really crucial here. If you commit these crimes that you just outlined, it's not just that you've been accused of the crimes, you have to be convicted of the crimes. In other words, they can say whatever they want. He's involved in a hate crime. He killed somebody. He's selling drugs. He violated this. They can't just say that. They have to take him to a court. They have to convict him and say, hey, we convicted this guy of this crime. Now we can throw him out. That's not the case here, is it? They've just thrown mud at this guy. And the incendiary hate really from the mainstream news media and the government that is just saying all this stuff. None of it has been proven. None of it has been, a lot of it hasn't even been outlined.
The only claim I've heard is that he was the mastermind of the Colombia protest, which, by the way, that in and of itself is not a crime. They have not directly accused him of a crime. In fact, I've heard them, when asked what is his crime, the only thing you've heard is, well, he is supporting terrorism.
Well, they must know that they're stuck in a quandary, a legal quandary. They don't want to say what his crime is. They're just trying to, bully this guy basically by not saying what the crime is, because if they say what the crime is, they got to prove it. And I don't think they want to prove it. I think they just want to berate, attack, disparage, bully, and get people to hate this person so much that many Americans are going to say, oh, yeah, he's a terrible person. We got to get rid of him. What about proving these crimes? Because they can do it to him. They can do this to anybody, can't they?
So this is, the problem here is, I think the people who don't care, the people who, I think the vast majority of the people who don't care won't care, no matter what you tell them. They don't even care if he committed a crime. The fact that he was at a school protest in many of their minds is enough. The fact that he was one of those students at a protest, to them is, they lack a fundamental understanding of what protest means and what those rights get granted to us by the First Amendment, how important they really are. And they've already started, Ray. This isn't just about Arabs and Muslims. This is about brown people from every faith: Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism,
even Jews who are standing up and criticizing Israel's government policies. This whole idea that it's anti-Semitic has created this atmosphere where many Jewish people feel that, oh my gosh, we're going to be the victims of anti-Semitism. They've created this hate atmosphere, the government has, to scare people into supporting what they're trying to do, aren't they?
Yeah, listen, it's one of the things I say routinely. If you conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Judaism, what you've now done is you've made now Jewish people afraid of real anti-Semitism, because the natural instinct is for the people who are critical of the state of Israel and who are critical of Zionism. Well, when you start telling them Zionism is anti-Judaism, people start to think, well, then I guess I'm anti-Jewish.
And you mean conflate anti-Semitism with criticism of the government, right? You criticize
Correct.
Israel's government. I criticize the U.S. government all the time. Sometimes I praise it. Depends on who's president, who's not president, who's the mayor, who's not the mayor. And this is a foreign country we're talking about. We're not even talking about criticism of American government. We're talking about criticism of a foreign country that has special privileges, and it's just horrible. I'm on the line with my guest, David Chami. He's a civil rights attorney. We're talking about the assault on Arab Americans, Muslims, and Jewish Americans who are speaking out against the attempted expulsion of Columbia College graduate Mahmoud Khalil. That expulsion is being viewed as the first step in a wider persecution and bullying of people whose views the government doesn't like. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will continue this discussion with our guest, civil rights attorney David Chami. I am Ray Hanania. We're going to be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Behind the scenes, Michigan's public health team is working to make Michiganders across the state healthier, bringing healthcare closer to home with mobile clinics, increasing access to healthy food through farmers markets and WIC, doing hearing and vision screenings in schools, helping families navigate healthcare challenges. Learn more about how public health workers protect us all at michigan.gov/public health. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American Board Certified Dr. Nicholas Chama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Chama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
And welcome back to Radio Baladi. This is Ray Hanania. It's Friday, March 14, 2025, here at WNZK AM 690 Radio, broadcasting live in the Michigan region. And we'll have this show posted on YouTube and on Facebook, and you'll be able to watch it and follow us. My guest this morning, it's so important because we're not just talking about one college student who's being graduate who's being targeted for expulsion. We're talking about a whole atmosphere of the destruction of the U.S. Constitution. And helping me understand this is our guest, civil rights attorney David Chami. David is with the Consumer Justice Law Firm. He represented 22 of 27 students who were suspended from Arizona State University last April after being accused, I think, of trespassing and damage to property, all kinds of stuff. David, how does that tie into what's happening? I mean, there's an escalation here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And to clarify, the students that were arrested at Arizona State University, that lawsuit is ongoing, and they were never charged with any damage to property or any crime.
What were they charged with?
Simply trespassing. In fact,
how do you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but how do you, does anybody make a case, such a federal case over a trespassing charge of students protesting at a university?
So a couple of those students were actually never charged, or they were originally arrested with trespassing, but had judges find that they were not trespassing and that there was no probable cause for their arrests.
And they're still suspended.
They still got suspended. In fact, those two students had longer suspensions than the others, because I think the university was so angry that they couldn't get them with a criminal charge, and they really wanted to punish them. But I will tell you that in that lawsuit, the Anti-Defamation League, which is an organization that is directly connected to the state of Israel. I actually consider them to be a foreign or domestic arm of the Israeli government. And Jonathan Greenblatt, who is, I would call him infamous, widely understood.
Just a horrible person, some of the things he said.
He's the CEO of the ADL. He actually was reaching out to university presidents all over the country and directly reached out to Arizona State University President Michael Crow 4 days before the protest, essentially giving him a playbook of what he expected the university's response to be if and when a protest at ASU had taken place. And I'm telling you, Michael Crow followed that playbook. President Michael Crow of the ASU followed that playbook, and they, within minutes of students arriving on campus to start protesting, had begun a campaign to organize law enforcement to arrest them all. Before any laws had been broken, before any potential law had been broken, it was the decision to arrest these students was made almost immediately, and they had letters drafted suspending these students within hours of their arrest. I mean, cookie cutter template letters. They were pre-written.
And it's lies. I mean, they're using lies and bullying tactics. The Anti-Defamation League, for years, I thought was a great organization, but over the last 2 decades, they've become very politicized, and they've weaponized anti-Semitism. Whether it's anti-Semitism or not, they just anybody that criticizes Israel's government is an anti-Semite. They hit you with that bludgeon. And the idea now that they've aggressively anticipated and responded to what they knew were going to be protests and bullied these universities to do what they wanted done in violation of U.S. laws. I mean, when it comes down to it, they still have to, in spite of all their criminal acts, when you talk about violating the Constitution, it is a criminal act to do that. And they could be charged, can't they, with violating the constitutional rights of students? I mean, to take an action and tell a university, these are bad people, you need to arrest them, you need to punish them, you need to make their lives miserable. Here's the list that you need to go after. Isn't that prosecutable?
Yeah, I mean, you'll never see a prosecution
Like
of
that,
the
right?
ADL. Yeah, no, you'll
In other
never
words,
see
what they're
that.
doing to these students they believe will never be done to them in this country because the level of hatred that
Look,
protects them.
the framing of the ADL is always that everyone who's protesting is pro Hamas,
Right.
and
Which is a
and
lie.
of course, well, it's indisputably a lie. That I would suspect that none of the protesters are pro Hamas. The vast majority of the protesters aren't Arab, aren't Muslim. They are, forward thinking US college students who care about humanity and are anti-war and anti-murder of children. So, I mean, it's these students didn't come out in October of 2023 or November or December. Almost every one of these protests only really were triggered by the relentless, nonstop bombardment of civilians. So that there's a very clear and direct line between genocide, or at least war crimes,
right,
and protests. Nobody protested in support of October 7th. It would have been
right.
It would be offensive.
Of course,
I
I'm
would have been
anti.
offended.
I don't support Hamas. I support a peace process between Israel and Palestinians. I recognize the rights of Israelis and Palestinians. I don't support Hamas. I don't support violence, and I don't support Israel's government. And yet it's that one thing where I say I don't support Israel's government, where people will then throw that label anti-Semitic. Now, Trump is doing everything possible and to justify what's being done. And I think you pointed out that he's turning to the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to invoke that as a basis to kick people out. I mean, what is that? 1798.
It is such an obscure act. I don't even know how it's still on the books. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 also would be inapplicable. But again, it was written in 1798 in response to, as you know, a new country which was in multiple wars, civil war.
Trying to survive Revolutionary War, right? Still
Revolutionary
the aftermath,
War,
right?
And the War of 1812, and and all of these wars. It's crazy how many times this act has been invoked, and every time it's been invoked, the government has ultimately apologized for its use, because in fact, the most recent time it was used was after World War, or during World War II. It was used to intern Japanese, not only Americans, but Japanese legal, people who are here legally and not non-citizens, but Japanese legal residents it was used to intern them, to put them in concentration camps. Some of them remained in camps for 6 years after World War II ended.
Wow.
Never charged with crimes, and it took until the 70s before they were ultimately, the act was, what they did was found to be unconstitutional, and then they later paid reparations to those Japanese people who had been interned, if they were still alive, of course, 40 years later.
Is that where we're headed, you think? I mean, it seems like we're on that same path, that they're going to round up Arabs and Muslims and even Jews who criticize Israel's government and put us in concentration camps the way they did Japanese Americans during World War II, simply because they were Japanese and we were fighting the Japanese government, not the people.
It is so. Look, the United States of America is a land of immigrants. Every single person here, just depending on when you trace your lineage back, came here from a foreign country. So the idea that there is a law, a 200-year-old law that allows the government to say, if you're from this country, even if you're an American, by the way, you can be found to be hostile to the United States, not based on any acts you do, not based on any actions you take, but simply because of your family heritage.
Wow.
That is a scary thing. And let me also tell you, it's supposed to only be used during a declared war, or the other two ways you can use it is if there is a invasion, even without a declared war, an invasion of America by, let's just say Mexico or some other country, or there is a predatory invasion by groups of people coming across the border. Okay, so what you see happening here, and again, that is not, people coming across the border. It's like a mini incursion by a militia from another country.
Right.
So, but what Trump is doing, and he said this on the campaign trail, he talked about the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. This isn't just about Arabs and Muslims, by the way. This is about migrants. This is about, they've been planning this for years. When you hear them talk about the caravans coming from Central and South America and coming through Mexico, they're trying to frame migrants, people coming here seeking asylum, as invaders. And you routinely, people think that these are Hispanics, but people from all over the world do enter the United States through Mexico seeking asylum.
And they're blurring the line, right? For example, I mean, I'm not against migrants who come into the country legally. There's a process to do that. I'm not against immigrants coming into the country through a legal process. What we've seen happen is that gets all merged with people who sneak into the country and come in illegally and then want to sit in the government, and it becomes a political issue where everybody's defended or everybody is attacked, rather than somebody smart in the middle saying, whoa, wait a minute, let's separate the illegal from the non-illegal and let's address it that way. This blurring of facts, this is a new thing. I've never heard of this before. And to see the president escalate it to a new level, blurring facts, not having to prove accusations, violating the U.S. Constitution. I think it's very frightening. And the fact that there's so many people out there that are willing to accept this without thinking, what is this doing to destroy our fundamental foundation of freedom and democracy in this country? It's frightening.
I think it's terrifying, Ray. And, you're talking about, I think you hit the nail on the head. These alleged caravans of people were not just swarming over the border. They were coming to customs and border patrol agents and seeking asylum and seeking entry. They were, many of them, of course, the vast majority, were being denied entry. But if they've come in through that process, it is legal. And so that is a legal process for coming into the United States. And it would not qualify as an invasion or, a predatory invasion of immigrants or illegal immigrants. So
this is part of this whole process of when you blur the facts with lies, when you merge facts and lies together, you sell it as a package of fact without ever having to defend it. I mean, that's what we saw Elon Musk doing, right? He says there are people that are 230 years old who are receiving Social Security. Social Security has only been around for what, 100, not even 100 years, wasn't it? During the Roosevelt
1932.
administration that started it in the 30s, I think. I'm sure there are people who are stealing Social Security whose relatives may have died, who might be, if they were alive, 130. Yeah, those people need to be investigated, arrested, and weeded out. But this idea, the exaggeration of the monies, this principle too that really bugs me is that the government says that they're going to fire thousands and thousands of federal workers, to save money. And 30 to 40% of those federal workers, by the way, are veterans who served this country. They want to save money. And yet, Trump had no problem writing a check for $8 billion to give to the government of Israel, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We're giving them $8 billion. And then if you say that, you're anti-Semitic. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I mean,
and it must be a burden for you as an attorney trying to represent the law. The rule of law is clear, right? And you have to go to court and fight for it against a system that doesn't want to recognize the rule of law anymore.
You know, Ray, I will say my experience in federal court has been that the vast majority of federal judges will apply the law and will, and have stood up to Trump or Biden or any of the presidents preceding to say, look, this is unlawful. This is inconsistent with case law precedent. And we have plenty of case law and precedent on these issues. What does become murky, Ray, is when you try to use a statute, or I'm sorry, this Alien and Enemies Act of 1798 is so broadly and vaguely written and so even in the past, the Supreme Court has taken up the issue of whether it could find what the president did to have been unlawful. So even the internment of the Japanese, even though later found to be unconstitutional, it was originally upheld not on the finding that it was legal, but on the finding that it was a separation of powers issue, that the president and the executive invoked it, and the court wasn't going to substitute its judgment for that of the executive branch. And so what you will sometimes see is courts, and the Supreme Court has become more politicized, that courts will use that as a way of not rendering a decision on the legality of the action. And that is what's scary. That is what I fear, because they already said, and this is something people should really be thoughtful of, President Trump, even though was being charged with crimes and convicted of crimes on the state level, the Supreme Court said, as the president of the United States, while in office, he cannot be charged with a crime. He has immunity.
Right.
You've now given the president, I don't care what party he's from and what party the future presidents will be from, the president is immune. If you are immune from prosecution while you are president, you can do anything you want because you are the chief law enforcement officer in the United States. You control the Department of Justice. You control essentially law enforcement, federal law enforcement agencies, and Customs and Border Patrol, ICE agents. So now when you give them directions, you've given them a blanket sort of protection because they're now following the chief officer of the United States.
Yeah, that's just shocking. We're going to take a quick break again. I'm on the line, and this is very understanding what the depth of the challenge that's being imposed, the violation of the rule of law, the violation of our rights. It's funny how you see communities, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, critical of Trump on certain issues, and yet silent on this one. And it really is disturbing. It's a hypocrisy. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we can take some phone calls if you want at 248 557 3300. 248 557 3300. My guest is civil rights attorney David Chami. We're talking about American human and fundamental rights under the Constitution that are being assaulted, compromised, ripped to pieces by our government as they try to expel a student, a graduate student at Columbia College, whose only action was to criticize the government of a foreign country and their policies in a foreign conflict. And yet it's the U.S. that's trying to undermine him. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll be right back right after these messages.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them one or two benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Jumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
Every year in Michigan, approximately 3,000 people die of drug overdose. Today's drugs are more addictive and deadlier than ever before. Most street opioids tested contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. Drug overdoses are preventable. Keep naloxone on hand. Together, we can change the statistics. Learn how to save lives at michigan.gov/SUD. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
And welcome back to Radio Baladi. I'm Ray Hanania. It's Friday, March 14, 2025. And we're on WNZK AM 690 radio, broadcasting live in Michigan. Our interview is with civil rights attorney David Chami. We're talking about the assault on not just Arab American and Muslim rights, but all American rights. They're trying to rip up the Constitution. They're trying to compromise laws. They can accuse you of a crime, and they don't even have to prove it, and they can punish you. They want to punish you without ever proving a crime. And that's inconceivable. It's just impossible to believe. We did see that happen in the 1930s in Germany when they didn't have to prove a crime. They just accused you of something. They arrested you and punished you and put you in a concentration camp. And it looks like that's where we're headed. We do have some time for phone calls if you want to call in at 248-557-3300. I know that Imad Hamad is not on the line, but I know that the American Human Rights Council in Detroit is organizing a press conference, I believe, this weekend to address the Mahmoud Khalil assault. It's just horrible. David, I don't know if you can. We have about 17 minutes left, which is a good amount of time, but what's the most important thing that the audience needs to understand about what's going on? With the blur of activity, all the news headlines, the propaganda, what should they stay focused on that's most important out of all of this stuff, do you think?
Look, I can tell you that the attack on the First Amendment, the suppression, the chilling effect of what they've done to Mahmoud Khalil has already taken place, meaning people are now seeing what happened to Mahmoud Khalil. They made it a huge deal intentionally because they wanted to strike fear in the minds of all Americans, whether you're a green card holder or a citizen. This was intentional, right? They really do want to cause you to be afraid to speak out against the state of Israel. And even the state laws, many of the state laws that have been passed that prevent you or attempt to prevent you from speaking out against the state of Israel, whenever they have been challenged in state court or in federal court, they've always been found to be unconstitutional. The legislatures will go back and reword it and repass a new version of it. But at the end of the day, the courts have routinely found that these statutes are unconstitutional. Criticism of a foreign government, boycott of a foreign government can never be a crime, at least not under the current jurisprudence in the United States. But there is real fear that as the country continues, or at least the politics in this country continue to make it, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I think both administrations have been very strong supporters of Israel and very harsh critics of Americans who criticize Israel. And so there's a bipartisan willingness to make criticism of a foreign government, and only one foreign government in the state of Israel, illegal. And so we should all be afraid because we forget history. It is a slippery slope. And if everyone says it's a slippery slope and people think, oh, it's just politics. And it's not just politics. If it were just politics, Mahmoud Khalil would not have been picked up because there was no lawful reason to pick him up extrajudicially the way they did, to remove him from his home without a warrant, to take him to Louisiana and throw him in essentially in ICE prison without giving him due process.
And no charges.
If you don't care about it, this is the thing, is if you don't think it's scary that they can take you out of your home. I mean, Palestinians are being ripped out of their homes by the IDF, and that is so scary and offensive to us. We think, how could that be? And it is starting to happen here, where a legal permanent resident can be ripped out of his home without committing a crime, without even being charged with a crime, and taken and put in detention with no charges, no access to his lawyers, or very limited access to his lawyers. That is scary. And what they really want is to make you afraid. And if you are now, I would imagine, if you are not a United States citizen, or even if you are a newly, naturalized citizen, and they've already started talking about this, right? The ability to unwind your citizenship. So, people should really be afraid. And it isn't just Arabs. It isn't just Muslims. Brown people in general, and I use that term loosely. We know who we are. Latino, African. If you're coming from another country, if you've been naturalized as a citizen, and you can talk about Sudan, you can talk about the Congo, you can talk about a lot of the countries in Africa that are engaged, that have conflict. You should be really concerned about the direction this country is heading in with regards to the rule of law. We seem to be using this law and order sort of cowboy rhetoric to talk about law and order as if it's something the government cares about, when in reality, it is the law of the president. And he said it to the governor of Maine. I don't know if you heard him, but he said, "I am federal law," and he's sadly mistaken.
But what's really sad is some people who hate him and who criticize him for these political views have made an exception when it comes to Israel's government. They're willing to tolerate what they hate when it comes to Israel's government, and the atmosphere is pushing good people into the corner of bad people simply because the exaggeration of the actions against Israel's government, the criticism, the more Israel's government does, the worse it gets. And instead of criticizing it, they kind of wrap themselves around, we have to defend them because it's getting bad. It's very complicated, and it's very hard to explain to people that step back and look at what you're saying. They don't want to
So,
do that.
so Ray, I would be remiss if I didn't say to state, maybe I'll state the obvious. It's APAC has, which is the American Israeli Political Action Committee, has publicly stated, and there's no dispute about the fact that they spent nearly $100 million to buy elections. Okay,
Right.
that's what they're doing.
Right.
And it's not just APEC. You have to look at even our own, some of our own people. The mayor of Dearborn Heights is a Lebanese American, Bill Bazzi, very publicly, vocally supported Trump. And guess what he just got? He got appointed to be the ambassador of Tunisia. The mayor of Hamtramck, who was very public, came on television, supported Trump, was recently appointed to be the ambassador to Kuwait. So people are being bought, and our politicians are being bought, whether they're Arab American politicians, Democrats like Cory Booker and Hakeem Jeffries and Richie Torres, and some of the most vocal, virulent, abhorrent sort of support, blind support for the state of Israel. When you look at how much money they've received from AIPAC, you start to wonder, there's a direct correlation. And this is one of the things that, unfortunately, in 2010, the United States Supreme Court basically said, in a case called Citizens United, that corporations are people. These political action committees can basically give money. They're entitled to try to influence politics. That's how you do it. And now you've got this unfettered control of donations that can go to these politicians. And, we've basically allowed legally, and I think it should be illegal, the purchase of congressmen and women.
I think the most important thing that you've said, though, that people should not forget is that there is a legal process. It is a struggle, I'm sure. It's expensive. It's difficult. It's not easy. But in the end, the majority of good judges, federal judges, people that are in the legal profession, the majority of them are going to respect and recognize the rule of law. And all these terrible things only can continue up until they bring them to a courtroom to be adjudicated, which is why I think they don't want to bring these things to a courtroom. They're not bringing Mahmoud Khalil to a courtroom to give him the opportunity to defend himself. They've just incarcerated him, and then they've gone out with the media campaign. But I'm encouraged by your feeling and your belief that the American justice system, the judicial system, fundamentally is still on the side of right. And even though it's a difficult road to pursue, that's the only option that we have, and it can be won. It's just going to be long and ugly.
And I do think, Ray, as an attorney, I spend most of my time, vast majority of my time, in federal courts. So I do have a lot of experience, and I practice law all over the United States through my law firm. I'm admitted in probably 23 or 24 federal district courts in different parts of the United States. And I practice, like I said, mostly federal law, civil rights law, consumer protection law in those courts. And I will tell you, from Trump appointees, from the first Trump administration, I've been in front of many of those federal judges and have had cases that I think are highly political cases. I've represented families who've lost loved ones to police abuse in Arizona, to excessive force in Arizona. And my judge was in that case was a federal judge appointed by Trump. Her husband was a Trump supporter who was at the time running for Senate in the state of Arizona, but had been the Attorney General of Arizona. And her rulings in that case, even though very political, at least in the state of Arizona, was very well known, were very fair. She followed the rules. She followed the law. Her opinion was well written, thoughtful. And I'm not going to lie, I had concerns about the political sort of aspect of that case, and my experiences have been very positive. That said, Ray, and as much confidence I have, um, not absolute confidence. I'd be lying if I said I trusted all the judges to do the right thing in this environment. But even though I do trust most of these judges to do the right thing and follow the law, the biggest challenge for people isn't what will happen to them when a judge gets to hear their case, because I think they have good odds if the law is on their side. The problem is getting access to lawyers.
Right.
And the ASU students I'm representing don't have money. I'm not charging their families money. I will likely, well, you never know what happens, but the chances are I didn't do this for money. I didn't take that case for money, but I have a limited capacity to take pro bono cases. I have to make a living. I have other cases to worry about. And so there just are a limited number of lawyers who can take these cases without payment. And if you need payment, it's unlikely that the people will be able to afford to pay you. So access to the courts is the biggest concern.
Yeah, and I know you're working with the Council on American Islamic Relations, a great organization, CARE, who's fighting for the rights of not just Muslims, but everyone who are targeted because of these Middle East issues. I know the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee just put out a call for lawyers who want to get involved. I think you're right. It's not enough lawsuits are being filed against the government to confront these violations of human rights. David, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to interview you, they want to talk to you, maybe they got a case or something, or find out more information about what you're doing? Where should they go, and how do they do that?
Consumerjustice.com. My website has our contact information, has my contact information. I wanted to say one thing, and this is not a direct appeal to donate to any organization. You mentioned the ADC. Abed Ayoub is the executive director and a lawyer and a friend of mine.
Great guy, right?
Who is the executive director of the ADC. CARE has chapters all across the United States. You're absolutely right. They do not only represent the interests of Muslims, they represent the interest of disenfranchised minorities who are being discriminated against, whether it's because there's a perception that they're Muslim or just, they are an ally in a group of people who need help. But here's the biggest challenge that those organizations face, and something I find that the Arab community, our communities, have really not done a good job, and that is supporting those organizations financially, because they have such limited access to resources. You go to a CARE chapter, they have one lawyer, most of them. I mean, you go to a bigger chapter, they might have 4 or 5, but we really do need to get behind those organizations, including the ADC.
You can't fight a war without resources. We see that all the time. Listen, David, thank you so much for joining us. Consumerlaw.com, you said?
Consumerjustice.com.
I'm sorry, consumerjustice.com is the website. My guest, civil rights attorney David Chami. David, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for listening. This interview will be posted on YouTube, on Facebook. If you go to my website at hanania.com, subscribe to the website. You'll get all this information about what's happening around the country. Stay informed. This is probably the most informative interview I've done in a long time about a real serious challenge to our fundamental rights as Americans, not just Arabs and Muslims. So go to that website at hanania.com and subscribe. You'll find the link to this video there, and share it, because people need to understand what David explained very succinctly about what's being done and what's not being done to stop it. I'm Ray Hanania. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to offer all the Muslims commemorating Ramadan, a Ramadan Kareem. We wish you the best. And it's just horrible to see all these things happening during Ramadan, a very important time. David, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Ray. Have a great day.
Always inspired by you. All right, everybody. I'm Ray Hanania. Remember, Ray Hanania. Remember, go to Hanania.com, HANANIA.com. All right? You get all that information. You have a great week, everybody. Ramadan Kareem. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again very soon. Bye bye, everybody. Thank you.